Okay, so another thing that tends to trip people up, and if anybody asks, I can do a more in-depth version of this, but it's a good practice to develop to write in the active voice. The active voice means that you are not writing in a passive style. So, especially with things like history, sciences, and English, although the passive voice is acceptable in English in some circumstances, you really want to be writing in the active voice, which puts the action and the subject and the object straight, in the sights of your reader. So, if we take a look at the first example here, if we're writing in the passive voice, we would say, "The ball was thrown to Ted by me." Doesn't sound very natural, does it? One of the reasons a lot of people write in it is because the passive voice generally takes more words to make sense, and so it can elevate word counts. But as we discussed in a previous video, adding detail is really the more effective way in order to increase your word count. A far more active voice version of that sentence would be, instead of "the ball was thrown to Ted by me," "I threw Ted the ball." So you have your subject, your verb, and your object. So I threw the ball, and then obviously you threw it to Ted. So if we take a look at another one, "Being in New York City was the best." Now, I'm just going to say this, even though this isn't part of this video, but I did this intentionally. Exclamation points and question marks in an informative or an argumentative or a research paper don't exist. They should never, ever, ever, ever be in there. It doesn't look professional, and there's nothing exclamatory about a research paper, and there shouldn't be any examples of you asking questions, even rhetorical ones, because you're the expert in this situation, so you shouldn't be asking your audience for their advice, basically. So rather than "being in New York City was the best," "I enjoyed my stay in New York City." So the best way to avoid the active voice is to make sure you're following the subject, verb, object, stay in New York, but also avoid to be verbs. That's the verb be, was, were, all of those that all represent a state of being. So use more advanced verbiage. You also want to avoid as many verbs that end in ing as possible. So you can see "being in New York was the best." So that's in the past tense. So all you have to do is say "I enjoyed," and you eliminate the ing. So "being" is kind of the double negative here, except it doesn't result in a positive for all of you math scholars. It's not only a form of "to be," but it also has ing on it. So that should be avoided when writing academic papers as much as possible. Again, these are things that we can work on in person, but just remember, subject, verb, object equals active voice. Avoid to be verbs and ing verbs.